Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar of today that will introduce you the CEN-CLC Joint Technical Committee 23 that is working on horizontal topics for PPE, personal protective equipment. We have the pleasure to have with us the different experts from the different working groups, so it will be a very exciting and interesting webinar, I think. My name is Els, and I'll be moderating the webinar in the background. As usual, all the participants are muted, so you cannot raise your question out loud, but you can use the Q&A panel to submit your questions should you have any question. You can see that on one of the next slides, I think. Yes, there it is. So that's me. And then on the next slide, you can see the Q&A panel. That's what it looks like. Should you be on LinkedIn or Blue Sky, because CEN and CEN-CLC are intending to move away from X and use Blue Sky, you can use the hashtag training for standards, and you can find us on LinkedIn and Blue Sky via the different links. So thank you very much for being here this morning. Without further ado, I would like to present you the different speakers of today. As I mentioned, we have the different experts of the working groups all connected this morning. I will not go into detail. You can see the list of names here. They will each of them talk through their different expertise in the working group. You have their contact details here. So should you have any questions after the webinar for them, or should you be interested to join the working group, please feel free to contact them. And then I would like to open the webinar by giving the floor to Henk Vanhoutte, who is the chair of the Joint TC 23. So please, Henk, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome from my side as well. It is indeed good to see that there's a good number of participants. So it means that there is an interest in horizontal topics for PPE, which is good to see and good to know that you're interested in learning more about this joint technical committee. So I'll keep it very short because I think the working groups are more important to explain and take time to go in them. But as you might know, or some of you might know, the CEN-CLC Sector Forum for PPE, which brings together all the technical committees dealing with specific PPE, but also stakeholders like the European Commission, trade unions, manufacturers organizations, and so on, has been discussing in the past years several times on horizontal topics for PPE that could not be assigned to one of the specific technical committees. And out of these discussions, it was clear that there is a need to develop standardization deliverables, not necessarily always standards, but can also be technical specifications or technical reports. So there is a need to develop such deliverables. Hence that with the members of the sector forum, we were developing a proposal for this joint technical committee, and we chose to be joint because it's not, even if the majority of standards of work for PPE is done at CEN level, there is some also at CEN-CLC. So we felt it is important to combine everybody to make sure we cover all types of PPE. One of the reasons why there's also a need is that, as you all know, there is a lot of changes in the legal framework, and then I'm not talking about the PPE regulation specifically. That's there since 2016 and not changing at the moment. But there's a lot of additional legislation where also PPE need to comply to, thinking of indeed everything to do with sustainability, circular economy, but also more awareness about compatibility, dangerous substances, and so on and so on and so on. So these aspects might need to be addressed also in standardization work. And then it's better to look at it on a horizontal level than each individual technical committee dealing with it, also in terms of resources, but also in the end, these other legislations do not necessarily take into account the a specific PPE. So that's a bit of the background why there was a need for such a joint technical committee. It was approved by both the technical boards in summer 23. We had the kickoff meeting in April 24. Secretariat is supported by BSI with Sarah Gibbs as the person. Myself, as mentioned, I'm chairing the joint TC. And end of 24, there were 6 working groups approved with their respective secretariats and chairs, and that's the ones that you will hear in a couple of minutes. 6 working groups means there is a lot of work to do in different aspects. And one of the reasons to have this webinar today is, apart from proposing, making sure the Joint Technical Committee is known, is also a strong appeal for experts for the working groups. In some of the working groups, you will see we need more than experts on PPE only. There are also other aspects and where we can use support from experts. I just put here in a slide the scope of the Joint Technical Committee, but definitely the last sentence is an important one where we clearly state product-specific aspects of PPE that are covered by the scope of existing technical committees and work programs will not be addressed here, but in the specific TCs. We are clearly looking at horizontal topics or topics that cannot be covered or not covered by the scope of one of the existing technical committees. With that, I wish you all a very interesting morning, and I give the floor to Working Group 1.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Laurent Houillon, and I am the convener of this new Working Group 1. And the purpose of this working group is to deal with terms and definition for PPE. The scope is very simple. In these cases, it's mainly to produce the terminology definitions for personal protective equipment. In these cases, of course, the main objective is mainly to gather the only one document, all the useful terminology, whatever the PPE stakeholders, and whatever, of course, their technical origins or interest. It's mainly the purpose of this joint technical committee to have a very large overview about all could be related to PPE. And the starting point is mainly, of course, to not to have some misunderstanding of some terms we can be used in the different standards, and to avoid any ambiguity of some expressions we can be used. And this is the reason why it could be important, of course, in these cases to have a good approach. And the approach we can get in this working group 1 is, of course, not to reinvent the wheel. We need to identify the existing terminology sources, and we have at least the 2 main important at the international level, which is what it is called the IEC Electropedia, and as well the online browsing platform from ISO, and to be able to identify the existing terminology standards. Say mainly to gather all this knowledge in only one document, which could be useful for any working groups in this joint TC. And of course, as we need to be more rational for the future work to be set up, we need to have an appropriate and very pragmatical structure in this terminology document, for the benefit, of course, of the different working groups. So we have to support really any working groups in this joint TC, and as well to ensure the consistency in the terminology in the different documents which will be issued by this joint TC 23. So this is a very brief, but it's only for this main purpose to have one document dealing with terms and definitions and for a benefit for all these joint TC 23. So that's it for my presentation. And of course, if you would like to have some additional information, you can use the Q&A, and I will do my best to answer this question. If not, I can let the next convener to present the next working group. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laurent. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ronald Heus, convener of Working Group 2, Ergonomics, Comfort and Compatibility of Personal Protective Equipment. As I said, my name is Ronald Heus. I'm the convener of this working group. The secretariat is held by Vera de Glas from CEN, and we will deal with all aspects of ergonomics, comfort, and compatibility. CEN-CLC and the Joint Technical Committee 23 have key responsibility in the development of standards of personal protective equipment. And Working Group 2 in particular contributes to standards to determine that PPE is ergonomically designed, comfortable and compatible with each other, the users, and the environment in which they are used. The aim for Working Group 2 is enhancing the ergonomics, compatibility and comfort of PPE to ensure that PPE meets the highest safety standards while improving user experience and efficiency, enabling industries to better protect the workers and increase the compliance with health and safety regulations. We have a mission statement, and our mission is to develop, contribute, and promote European standards that ensure PPE is ergonomically designed, compatible with each other safety equipment, and the environment. And it's also comfortable for prolonged use while safeguarding the health and well-being and productivity of the users. The scope of the working group is developing standards and guidelines to measure hindrance, compatibility, and comfort or discomfort of people using PPE that protects them from hazards and give insight in the performance of these means. Then we have the objectives, standardization of ergonomics. We have to create and refine ergonomic standards for PPE to reduce fatigue, discomfort, and injury. We are also aim for compatibility improvements, ensure that PPE can be used together with other safety gear without compromising the protection of comfort of the wearer. We are looking to the user-centric comfort, so focus on the comfort of PPE to improve the wearability for extended use, which in turn enhances workers' productivity and compliance, taking into account different scenarios such as different climatic conditions, and also the awareness and adoption. So we promote the adoption of these standards across industries and manufacturers, ensuring companies comply with the latest ergonomic compatibility and comfort guidelines. There are already some standards on ergonomics. They previously were dealt with the TC 122 Working Group 14. However, Working Group 14 no longer exists, and we will hand over these standards to Working Group 2 of the Joint Technical Committee 23. That's in particular the EN 13921, Personal Protective Equipment Ergonomical Principles, and also the EN 17558, 2023, Ergonomics and Ergonomics of PPE Ensembles. And of course, there are many other standards like the EN 7528, Clothing, Physiological Effects, Measuring of Water Vapor Resistance by means of a sweating mannequin. And also within ISO, we have a compatibility standard developed, and we aim that we integrate the compatibility and the ergonomics into one EN ISO standard. However, the project group in ISO has to give back their task to come to an integrated standard. So we have now the opportunity to develop an EN ISO standard within this working group. The strategy, we look to research and development, follow the latest innovations to improve PPE. We have standard development, update standards on ergonomics, and according to the latest PPE development, but also we can have the opportunity to develop new standards. We try to have the stakeholder engagement, so we keep all stakeholders involved to promote using the ergonomic standards. We want to implement and adopt these standards, so guidelines and training for with PPE manufacturers to promote using the PPE, marketing and outreach, so dissemination through all the possible channels we have. And we also take into account the quality control and the certification. So we develop a reliable and compliant certification process. So I come to the conclusion. CEN-CLC Joint Technical Committee 23 Working Group 2 focus on ergonomics, compatibility and comfort of PPE will provide a significant step forward in improving worker safety, comfort and productivity. By advancing standards that prioritize user experience while maintaining high safety standards, we can help industries meet both current and future challenges in PPE design and implementation. I also want to emphasize that we have our first meeting on the 12th of March in London, UK. That's the day previous to the Joint Technical Committee 23 meeting. So I also want to ask people to attend to the working group too, if they have something to add to this working group. So thank you very much.
So, good morning. This is Giovanna Longo. I'm the convener of working group T3. I'm the convener. I think somebody might know me because of my work in clothing standard and hearing protection standard. The secretary is Eric van Daly, is also very long in the business of standard and PPE. So we have a deep knowledge of CEN and ISO standardization work and also on the PPE regulatory landscape. We have basic knowledge of sustainability, and that's why, you know, we would like to have a lot of newcomer and joining this working group. The secretary is in Belgium, and Vienne. And let me go to the reason for this working group and what we think we want to do. Well, everybody knows about the European Green Deal. It's a big work that the European Commission has started in 2019, is going on. At the moment, there is no requirement for PPE directly, or at least not strict requirement, apart from some exception. But what does the Green Deal means for PPE? Let's be prepared and be active on time. So, and why we want to have this VG? Why are we working on this working group? First of all, is because of the regulatory landscape and also a lot of customer demand on sustainability in PPE. Public tenders are coming slowly, and several technical committees were worried on how to deal with that. First of all, there's no knowledge in the technical, or limited knowledge in the technical committee on sustainability. And also, I mean, each technical committee, I mean, could be respiratory or hearing protection, are busy with their own already quite packed program. And therefore, already in the PPE sector forum in the last couple of years, it was thought, okay, how do we go forward? And there was the creation of guidelines for standard writers and regulator when it goes on sustainability and PPE. But then finally came the idea that it would be good, as the sector forum is not allowed to create standard to pass this responsibility to JTC 23, and that is why we are now there. We have now we are working in JTC 23 working group 3, if you can move a bit. And now we have and the next one, and now so we started, and we just started. It's a new group and is a new job that we have to do, but it's really worldwide. So where do we start with that? Actually, it's not that we start from zero. There is an incredible amount of work done already by other organizations, by other working group and technical committee, but it's really difficult to understand, okay, so what is worthwhile to be doing for PPE? We don't know it yet. I mean, we have some ideas, but I think to come out from this kind of salad of different possibility that we can have, it's very important, because very often we see customer asking okay, you are sustainable, but how can you prove that? And there is an incredible amount of eco-label and you name it, and it's difficult to see what is right and what is wrong. So that would be one point where we want to approach. So what we want to do, and if you go to the next slide, is to start with a workshop. So if you are interested, in February 26 and 27 in Brussels, we will have a workshop where we will ask everybody to express their opinion. I think there is a lot to learn from other technical committee. For example, in the sector forum, we had a lot of opinion from hearing protection, from protecting clothing, but we did not have enough from, let's say, fall protection or eye protection or head protection. So it's very important that everybody is participating, but also a lot of people expert on sustainability. So what we want to do during the workshop is to get to roughly the same level of knowledge, because there are a lot of things we can learn from each other. Everybody knows a bit more about sustainability on things. Understand the needs of stakeholders, for example, small, medium enterprise. What do they need? What is important for them? And then prioritize a work plan. So this is the way we want to do it. And if you go to the next slide, I lost. Can you still see the slides? Hello?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I have a white screen, but it's no problem because I know the slides by heart. So I can go on and see it. Okay, now, sorry. So the workshop agenda on the day first, we will have introduction of the participant and the keynote presentation. So all the experts we have invited will give presentation, and then some update on standard development. And then on day 2, we can work on the feedback from day 1 and really have an interactive discussion on a workshop, and then get feedback from the breakout session. And then finally, we will probably put together a work program or kind of program plan for working group 3. And if you go to the next slide, so as I said before, we need experts from different fields. We would love to have sustainability expert joining to help us. I think it's a joint effort from, apply to PPE what is sustainability, but I mean, keeping, the same level of protection, keeping the fact that, there are some no-go area. You cannot compromise protection of end user if you focus on sustainability. And as I said, participant of sustainability standard would be very nice to have, expert for each PPE category, notified body if there is somebody who is expert in testing, enforcement authority, why not? Would be nice to get some insights from authorities, local or European. SME and NGO would be great. And therefore, register by February 12th, it's a deadline. Please register, because as it's a new working group, we need to know who is coming to be sure that we have enough capacity at CEN-CLC to host you. So if you're not registered, unfortunately, you cannot join. That is unfortunately so, because we need to be ready. So by February 12th, please register if you want to join in Brussels, 26th and 27th of February. Thanks for your interest, and I will pass now to working group 4.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Karin, the convener of Working Group 4, which is here briefly abbreviated as Smart PPE. So if you could go to the next slide. Then we see the full title, which is Smart Electronic, Electrical and ICT Properties of PPE and PPE Ensembles. I'm leading this group together with Paul Holstock, who has the expertise on electrical and especially electrostatic risks, while my background is on smart and electronic textiles and textile products, also PPE. So we will be looking in this working group at the integration of smart electronic and ICT elements, and also protection against electric and electrostatic risks. It's kind of a large bunch together, but the main theme is anything related to electronics. So if we can move on. Want to start with the smart electronic and ICT elements integrated very briefly. Quite often, this is just lumped together as smart PPE. One has to point out there that it's not usually not a standalone system, but quite often you have it in a bit wider context. As you can already see in the brief figure, usually on the ensemble itself, you will have different devices which are connected by either a wired, or now actually the preference is going more, of course, towards a wireless network. And then, as you can see in the figure below, you will have not one individual on its own, but quite often a series of individuals which are then communicating with a central unit through another network, so that it can be quite a complex system. So in this working group, we want to address a bit the different aspects, not always finding a solution ourselves, but at least helping people to point them towards how to address this. So if we can have the next slide, please. The work, it's not new, and it's also not that we have to start from scratch. Some first documents and first activities are already ongoing, some already for quite a while. In CEN-CLC 162, Working Group 1 and Working Group 2 had work under a mandate on advanced garments and ensembles of garments for protection against heat and flame with integrated smart textile and non-textile elements. I will come later to the publications made. Then we have CEN-CLC 248 Working Group 31, Smart and Electronic Textiles, working together with ISO TC 38 Working Group 32, Smart Textiles. Working Group 31 has already existed for more than 10 years now. We're looking at some general principles, guidance documents, sometimes also detailed documents. And then we established an ISO counterpart, and also more than 5 years now we have under IEC, IEC TC 124, Working Group 2. Sorry, there's a typo here. The TC is called Wearable Electronic Devices and Technologies, and there's a working group for smart textiles, but in general, the whole TC addresses wearable devices. As I already said, the bits and pieces are there, and what we want to look at in our working group is a general approach for all PPE, but especially also look at the ensembles. And then if you have a complete system, as we already mentioned, it goes beyond what you would consider PPE itself. And then also there is a need for some guidelines and normative support for certification. So if we can have the next slide. Is that the next slide? Yes. Just briefly, as I already mentioned, the mandate, where an exercise was already made for garments. Initially, it was hoped also to have it for the whole, all of PPE, but it was just for some garments, and then also it was focused on heat and flame. So 3 documents were published. As you may notice, my colleague Laurent Houillon took over the part on the terms and definitions. So we already have those in place. Then the standard was written for how to make the testing and assessment of protective clothing, and then a TR for the guidance for selection, use, care, and maintenance. So again, any definitions will be taken care of also under JTC 23 in Working Group 1. But in Working Group 4, we would like to focus on the other 2 documents and expand them towards all PPE and then all ensembles. So next, please. In Working Group 31, a recent document has been written, textile and textile products with integrated electronics and ICT. Especially here, the categorization, applications, and standardization needs part is important. The definitions, again, are linked to other definitions existing. Here we have some examples for PPE. This will be a valuable basis for our work in Working Group 4. Next, please. And the work in IECTC 124 is quite important. They're focusing on everything a bit more from the electronics point of view. And they have written a lot of very valuable documents on wearable devices, sensor materials, and other information. The list is too long to list here, but if you look it up on the IEC website, you can look at all their publications. I'd like to point out that in the Working Group 2, we have a very close cooperation among these 3 committees. And I forgot to mention, I am convener of both Working Group 31 and Working Group 32, and I'm the liaison in Working Group 2 of IEC. So the next point, please. Okay, then the electrical risks. A bit of a different topic.
Good morning, everyone. My name is
Paul.
Oh, sorry. I think Karin is back.
Yeah, sorry, my connection was lost. But Paul, you're also welcome to take over if you prefer.
Well, you just if you just want to finish on this slide, Karin, then I'll take over.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, with the damaged electric vehicles, we've already encountered that there could be a risk to those working on them. I guess if you have the vehicles functioning normal, then there are standard procedures available. For damaged vehicles, this cannot be guaranteed, and there's a risk for a harmful situation. So the idea would be to look at what would exactly be needed, what is already maybe available from car manufacturers, and to take a bit of a look at this. And the 2 main actors that for the moment we have in mind is the mechanics, the ones who will be doing the repairs, but also rescue workers who are coming to the site of an accident. And next slide, please. I think now, indeed, we move on to Paul. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Karin. Hello again, everyone. My name is Paul Holdstock. I'm responsible or the project leader for the work that we're doing on electrostatic risks within Working Group 4. We have really two standardization activities that we're focused on at the moment. And one of these is really our responsibility, which is the revision of the SUCAM document, the selection, use, care and maintenance of PPE for preventing electrostatic risks in hazardous areas. So we're really dealing with explosion risks in areas where there are potentially explosive atmospheres. This is a CEN-CLC technical report. It's 16832, published about 10 years ago. It was developed by Joint Working Group 7, which is now disbanded. So the revision of this is now the responsibility of Working Group 4. So that will be the main focus of our work in electrostatic risks. But we do need to coordinate with the EN1149 series. This is the existing series of standards, which are the test methods and performance requirements for protective clothing for use in explosive environments. So there's 5 parts. Parts 1, 2, 3, and 5 are mature standards. They've been published for some time. The one that we are working on in future is part 4, which is the a test method for garments, and that work will continue in TC162 Working Group 1. But we need to keep a watch on the developments there so that we can incorporate any developments into the revision of the SUCAM document. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've already identified a number of requirements for the revision of the SUCAM document. Some of these are editorial, like updating references from the PPE directive to the PPE regulation, and updating normative references. I've already mentioned that we need to include any new text in relation to 1149 Part 4, the full garment test. And we know that there are other product technical committees that have developed new text for their standards. So, for example, we have the new text in the EN397 for head protection on electrostatic risks. And we need to coordinate with any work that's going on in other product committees relating to the electrostatic properties of their products. Next slide, please. There are other technical aspects that we need to review, perhaps revise, and some additional text that is required. You'll see them listed there, and we are sharing the slides afterwards, so I won't go into the details of these now. But there are a number of technical requirements that need to be reviewed and revised accordingly. And no doubt, once we start the revision process, there will be more questions and more need arising for revision within the document itself. Okay, next slide, please. In relation to what's going on with the 1149 Part 4 and the need for this, I mentioned that we already have parts 1, 2, 3, and 5 published, and the way things have been working up until now is that parts 1 and 3 really are the test methods for fabrics, and then part 5 is the performance and design requirements. So the idea is that you test the fabric, and combining those results with the design requirements in part 5, you can evaluate a garment. And the idea, if we can go to the next slide, please. So when we started developing EN 1149, we had in mind simple garments, garments made from essentially the same materials, with perhaps some small attachments that comply with the relevant IEC standard for the the restriction on the size of non-dissipative materials. But what we see on the market now is far more complex garments that are required to protect against multiple hazards, and therefore they very often have multiple attachments, often quite large attachments, like the in this example you see there the pads on the knees, the large areas of retro-reflective material. So what we need is a test standard for evaluating garments as a whole, and that's the intention of the work in 1149 Part 4. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So the requirements for that garment test is that all parts of the garment must be charged, and measurements must be made on all parts of the garment. The whole garment and the garment assembly must be tested. We must replicate the worst case conditions, and whatever parameters we measure, they must relate directly to the ignition risk. Next slide, please. So work has been going on for quite some time in a number of institutes, mainly INERIS in France and STFI in Germany. INERIS has now discontinued all PPE testing, but STFI are continuing to develop this test method. The basic concept is that you take a mannequin, dress it with the garment under test, or the garments under test if it's an assembly, and then charge it using a corona charging mechanism, either in an array, which the garments, in this example, the mannequin is on a turntable, so as the turntable moves, you're spraying charge over the whole of the garment, or the array itself can move, and you basically pass an array over the garment to make sure that all parts are charged. Sorry, if you can just click down a few. Yeah, if you, oh, sorry. They're not going to show all at once. Yeah, so we can measure a number of parameters. We can measure field. We can measure the charge transfer in discharges or other parameters related to electrostatic discharges, or we might even be necessary to actually do an ignition test using a gas probe. But this is the work that's ongoing, and will eventually lead to a test method for EN 1149 Part 4. And once that has been more developed, then we will look at including that within the SUCAM document. So the next steps for Working Group 4, we have 2 workshops planned, and these will be online only, on the 28th of January and the 4th of February. The one in January will relate to the SUCAM document that I've just described, and also the work on smart materials and integrated ICT elements that Karin has mentioned. And then on the 4th of February, we have another workshop specifically dealing with the electrical risks for electrical vehicles. And then our first meeting of Working Group 4, this will be a hybrid meeting on the afternoon of the 12th of March, just before the next JTC 23 meeting. And we have a tentative plan at the moment to have a joint meeting of Working Group 4 and the CEN-CLC 162 project group, possibly in May or June of this year. So on behalf of Karin and myself, thank you. And if you do have any questions or need any further information, you see our contact details there. Thank you. And with that, I will hand over to Working Group 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Karin. Working Group 5. Next slide, please. Next, please. Working Group 5 works on fire and rescue as end users grouped together on on PPE, specific on PPE. Next slide, please. I am Maurice Cameron, working for the National Institute for Public Safety in the Netherlands. Our secretary is Jikke Haak, working for the national standard body in the Netherlands as a consultant at NAN. Next slide, please. At the first bullet, fire and rescue PPE and end users must work in a very special and exceptional circumstances that are a consequence of incidents and or instability situations. Working in these circumstances is primarily saving people and, where possible, limited the major environment damage and social impact. With this first bullet, examples of the risks to consider here are fire, suffocation, explosion, drowning, entrapment, hypothermia, electrocution, contamination, fall from height or depth, but have also considered that latent risk such as heat stress, contamination, ergonomics, mismatch due to incorrect size of PPE, insufficient coverage on interfaces, and discomfort. The second bullet are the actions are always in an urgent nature. Decision has to make in an urgent great time and often in a split second. This decision and circumstances with a highly variable life-threatening risks and has an impact on the choice and availability of the PPE. The third bullet is we will work on harmonizing the fire and rescue related products standards. And maybe it's good to mention that this group is the successor of the joint working group firefighters as a part of the sector forum. But this group will go further and broader than only firefighters because we do also rescue. Next slide, please. The group of fire and rescue end users relies heavily on the protective equipment, so to say PPE. These protective resources will mostly used in combination with other PPE. The changing and unpredictable conditions mean that proper preparation is necessary. This preparation will be a result of a risk assessment, acquired knowledge, and applied science. JTC 23 gives this specific target group of end users the opportunity to better organize themselves Europe-wide in developing, exchanging knowledge and experience PPE with the product standards committees, and to achieve a better and targeted alignment with practice of fire and rescue. Next slide, please. The mission statement. Working Group 5, Fire and Rescue PPE, was established to organize and harmonize with the broad support of the European countries the function needs of the fire and rescue end users and to support the target group with the knowledge, advice and tools for the preparation and use of the appropriate PPE and PPE systems for fire and rescue organizations in Europe. Next slide, please. JTC Working Group 5 and Fire and Rescue PPE will harmonize and develop advices. That's the scope, of course. The advices, the functional scenarios, what will mean the need, what we actually want and need to have in the field. The frameworks of the technical reports to enable standard committees, industry, suppliers, and end users to improve the product's function of PPE systems for the target group and fire and rescue. Next slide, please. We have also the objectives. Creating a functional scenarios of the European fire and rescue services. We think that it's very important to come from to start by the practice and what is a need, not only for the committees but also for the end users to have the more speak with one mouth, and not only just a firefighter left and then rescue worker on the other side, but to have a total and a common approach. The third bullet of the second bullet is the reference point and the platform for the standard committees and national standard bodies to issue the questions relating to fire and rescue. And the third is to develop supporting documents, frameworks, and guidelines to accordance the structure with the topics such as selection criteria, compositions, interconnectivity of systems, cleaning, maintenance, and creating specifications of end users of the target group. And that's just an overview. Next slide, please. Strategy. The same as working group 5, we did mention some of working group 2, sorry. We did mention some points for the strategy is in research and development, follow the latest innovations of PPE, on standard development, defeat the standard committees to functional needs and scenarios to promote developing PPE systems, PPE and PPE systems. Stakeholder engagements, keep all stakeholders involved to create and promote using the standards. I think that is a very important one to our end users. Broad implementation and adoption, supporting introduction, frameworks, and guidelines for fire and rescue end users to support preparations. And also there is I think a good step, if we can make that a good steps forward to bring Europe more to one user group. Marking and outreach, dissemination through all possible channels with respect, of course, of the rules of CEN-CLC. Quality rules and a certification develop for the end user a reliable and compliant certification process, and in my opinion also a testing process. Next slide, please. A number of topics of current interests. The equivalence in availability of and resources of each employees. So that means for males, females. I think females has not the same equipment as males now have by sizing. There are big differences, but there are many more. So that's one of the topics where we want to work on, especially for our user group. Thermal performance balance. Currently, they're very relevant for the fire service, but not only for the fire service. And it's not only by firefighting, but also the climate is changing. So we have to there adapt to that. Care, and very a long-term topic. The cleanability, what is clean and what is clean enough. The qualification of cleaning results, all those topics we will deal with. We may have already made big steps, and I think there are some steps to make that will help eventually the end user in the end, but also the standard body. Using of materials in PPE. Well, I think everyone is known about the problems around PFAS, but also the re-implication of materials. By doing so, you bring every time new substances in the environment. We would like to think about that because that's not only material, it could also have impact on the tactics and the tactics of the firefighter. And by changing the tactics of the firefighter, that could be changing probably also the PPE or the needs of this kind of materials. So it's broader than just looking from the point of view of the technical committee, but also from the end user. And this is just only a sampling of topics that are current, but by mutual agreement, Working Group 5 will deliver a work plan with topics and priorities. We have to start, so I think one of the first things to do is to work on which kind of topics are. I think these topics are already there, but there may be probably many more. Next slide, please. Conclusions. Working Group 5 will focus on contribute to the standard development with end users' goals and experience while maintaining highly safety standards to help industry and end users address this current and future challenges of PPE developments and implementations, functional needs of PPE for fire and rescue will be developed of support documents, frameworks, and guidelines. What will bring improvement preparation of the firefighter workers' safety, usability, and effectiveness of the PPE. Next slide, please. Well, Carl, we need, of course, also people who are part of this group, and especially we're looking to end users, representatives on behalf of the national level of the fire services and rescue organizations. I think there is also a need for people that are really doing the actions, but also as a representative of the national fire and rescue services to have impact. All need the application by process is doing by the national standard bodies, and every participant has to follow the line by the national standard body, and is a participant of those those countries. And I hope we will have also collective of trade unions representatives and users. For questions, you can send them to Jikke Hak. The email is in the sheet. And thank you for your attention. That's the next slide. Next for your attention, and there's room for some questions in the Q&A. And I hope, Jikke, you will have maybe already some collected.
Thank you, Maurice. Many questions were answered while you and the other speakers were talking, but there's one specific question on cooperation with ISO TC 94 and Subcommittee 14. So could you highlight or say something about this? Was it mentioned or not? I don't remember.
No, it was not mentioned, but yes, of course, in ISO, there's also a lot of things happening, and we will following. We are part of it as well, not Working Group 5, but some experts in this group will be a part of the ISO committee, SC14. and we will mirror that what is happening there, and I think we will bring to ISO the same the results as we do. So there will be as a mirror group working on. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I think then there is one last working group represented by Natalie Wilson, who will present the working group on inclusive PPE. So Natalie, please, the floor is yours.
Perfect, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Natalie Wilson, and I'm convener of Working Group 6, which is focused on inclusive PPE. So to give the purpose and background of inclusive PPE, really the purpose of having a working group focused on inclusive PPE is, of course, to make sure that everybody can safely work and be protected, and that PPE doesn't become either a barrier to being able to work in certain industries for certain people, or that it creates secondary hazards and risks due to incorrectly fitting PPE. So we've looked at the European Commission study on the inclusiveness of anthropometrics in standards. Their conclusion was that if standards do not consider the diversity of human bodies, they may fail to ensure the safety, comfort, accessibility and usability for products across the European population. Specifically, they have identified 76 PPE standards where they've identified that the potential impact of the fact that the standard is not inclusive has a high risk to human health and safety, and therefore there's an urgent revision of legislation required. So that's where we're starting from, and we're using that to drive the scope and work items that we're looking at. So if we look at the scope of Working Group 6, we are looking at two parts initially. The first immediate task will be to review the study of anthropometrics and to see which of the standards we need to address most urgently. It's also important that it's not just the standards, but it's the test methods within the standards that might be prohibitive to inclusivity, or that they create issues for manufacturers and distributors to develop products, or that end users don't know that they're available. So we want to start from that point of looking at which of those standards needs to be addressed immediately or in the short term, and also to then look as part two to under part one, make sure that the 76 are all of the standards we need to look at, or see if we think there are other standards that we can identify within the standardization community that need to be addressed. And then part two will be to develop an approach that sits across the technical committees to support them. So how do we address making those required revisions? Are there certain test methods that sit across several standardization groups and technical committees, and do they impact certain standards in different ways? So we can start to address that. We've also identified a potential future work item, which would be to create a European standard for the provision of inclusive PPE. Both myself and Sarah Gibbs, who I forgot to say is the Secretariat for Working Group 6, we are in the process of developing a BS, a British standard for the provision of inclusive PPE, which is in drafting stage and due to release in the next few months. So that will be a really interesting future potential review. We can learn a lot of lessons from that being the first standard that we release under that category. And we're also very, very open to suggestions for other work items from industry, from end users, from anyone who is impacted at all by the PPE and making sure that it's inclusive. So our approach to this is first and foremost, as I say, we're going to review the Commission's report and the risks that have been identified to make sure that we have categorised all of the PPE standards in terms of risk. And then we'll look at prioritisation, and that will be based on the risks that we've identified, but also based on data gaps. So there's been some funding approved for some anthropometrical data and studies, which is desperately needed to be updated. What we have currently is at least 40 years old in terms of anthropometrical data, and isn't necessarily related to the European population. So we need that work desperately to kind of go go through and see if there's any other gaps that we've identified through that, making sure that we've got liaisons into committees that are working across that. So also working with our colleagues in specifically thinking of working group 2, looking at how inclusive PPE needs to be considered for the ergonomic standards that they're looking to, and the research that they've already identified and have access to as well. And working group 6, obviously, if you're looking to develop female firefighter PPE, which was one that Morris mentioned specifically, that we can help support and give a slightly perhaps a different a view or a different approach on that. So the working groups will definitely be working together as well. There's a lot of knowledge and experience, and there are some categories that sit very clearly across all of those. So we'll support that. And as has been stated, we're not a technical committee. We're not taking over any of the work of the technical committees, but we're here to support them. So once we've created the prioritization of the risk and the gaps in the data, we'll then pass those to the technical committees to ask them to review the impact specifically to their standards. They may well identify additional items that we haven't considered, and that's their role. They're involved in the technical side on a day-to-day basis. So we'll take that, and the aim will be to create a framework or a matrix that will help support the development of future PPE standards, and also reviews of current standards and test methods to make sure that they're fit for purpose. And we will provide the technical committee with any support if they've got any questions or challenges on inclusive PPE, or they have any anything that they'd like us to look at specifically, or to provide liaisons across different technical committees. We can look to do that. And key for me is that this is a really circular process, because we won't stop once we've created the matrix and say, there we go, we fixed it. We continue to look at it and review it, look at the latest data, look at other risks that may be identified as we go along and technologies change. So that's really our intention, our approach. We have an inaugural meeting set up. It will be a remote Teams meeting on Thursday, the 20th of February from 10 till 3 UK time. If you'd like to attend, we would love you to. The registration deadline is the 19th of February. And if you have any work item proposals, then please submit those a couple of weeks ahead. So we're looking at Wednesday, the 5th of February for the work item deadline. And that's just so that we can start to look at it in the inaugural meeting. That isn't the only opportunity to raise new work items, but that would be for the inaugural meeting. And as others have said, registrations via the national standards bodies within your own country, and we would really welcome those to join. In our experience of developing the British standard, what's been incredibly important is having end users represented within the committee and the discussions, because they obviously have a day-to-day vested interest and also experience that is really critical to being able to be successful in developing this. So we would love distributors, manufacturers, everybody from industry, standards makers, people who've never been involved in standards before, and end users to all please come and join us. This is definitely a call to join, please. And I think that's it. If there are any questions at all, happy to take them.
Thank you, Natalie. There is no question I can see in the list. So all good, I think. I would like to thank you and all the other speakers as well for this interesting overview. And thank you to all of you who have been answering the questions. That one very fluent, so I think that's a good thing. I would like to hand over the floor again to Henk, because he triggered me saying that he would like to recap some stuff. So Henk, please, floor is yours again.
Okay, thank you. And indeed, thank you to all the presentations. I think it was useful to have an idea of what your plans are. But as mentioned by several, it is at the start, so the final or the work plan still needs to be established. So there is room for input, and we do need input from all of you. And as mentioned by a couple of people, also the input from users is very needed. Just a couple of things that I picked up from the questions that were already answered in writing. So one, the presentation will be shared with all of you, so you can be assured of that. There was also some questions related to how to cooperate with other TCs or the specific product TCs specifically. Well, we are in the process of setting up mutual liaison agreements with the specific TCs so that there is indeed this ensured exchange of information so that the TCs do know what's happening in the joint TC, but also the other way around, because the last thing we want is do the same thing in different groups. That's something nobody wants. We don't have, as you have heard, there's a lot of work to do, so we cannot afford to do it twice in different groups. So that is definitely ongoing. There's already some liaisons that are officially set up, others are in the process. So that is the way to ensure that. And yes, indeed, also as mentioned, there is an overlap between or a potential overlap between the different working groups. At some point, you have to try to divide the work. So we thought the way we have done it now is a efficient way, but indeed realizing there is overlap. So during plenary meetings of the Joint Technical Committee, there will definitely be an important exchange between the working groups of their work, but even between the meetings, and if necessary, there is also room and always room for additional exchanges apart from the JTC meetings between the conveners and secretariats of the working groups, so that everybody is aware what's happening in other groups and that they can also support each other. Like Natalie also gave the example of firefighters, female firefighters. Well, working group 6 can support working group 5 in that work. So we are aware of the need of good communication between the different groups, both within JTC 23, but also with other technical committees. So that's something that we are very much aware of and will work on. There were some questions related to PPE for use in the healthcare sector. Thank you for those. I would say we have set up the 6 working groups at this point based on the needs we already knew. If there are other needs that could be covered by JTC 23, don't hesitate to contact the myself or the secretariat of the JTC, and we can see if there is an interest how to deal with it, either in one of the existing working groups, or if necessary, set up another working group. I do sympathize with the idea of there is a need of information in the healthcare sector on which types of PPE, how to correctly use them, maybe based on use scenarios. I don't know. So if there is an interest from several people, very happy to look at that and see what can be developed. As far as I know personally, there's not that much available for that specific sector yet. But again, if there's an interest and if we have experts, then happy to work on that. And then there were also some questions on how to join a working group as an expert. Typically, that is done by the national standards bodies that need to register you as an expert in the relevant working groups. So I would say if you have an interest in joining one of the working groups or several of the working groups, first point of contact is your national standards body. If you don't know the way there, don't hesitate to contact us and we'll guide you in the right direction. There was also a question related to the workshops organized by Working Group 4. If you're not already registered as an expert, how or is it possible and how is it possible to join those? And if I understood from Karin, if you're not registered as an expert, you can send an email to Karin Eufinger. Email is in the presentation where she will allow you to participate that way. And that's it for me. So yeah, I don't know if there's I don't see any other questions open. So back to you, Els.
Yes, thank you, Henk. I just opened the feedback poll, so I would like to ask, before we close down this webinar, I would like to ask all participants to reply the 3 short questions. It's questions on your satisfaction in relation to the webinar, and we use the answers to improve our webinars for the future. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. And then on the very last slide, you see a list or small list with the events and webinars that CEN-CLC are organizing in the near future. So as promised, we will share the presentation and the recording with all attendees later today. And all the links that you've seen in the previous slides and on these slides are available for you to consult. So I would like to thank again all the speakers and all the other persons that were in support for this webinar. We were many, so I think that was part of the success. Thanks a lot for that. And also thank you to all the participants that joined to this webinar. So thank you, and hopefully see you later or one day during a webinar. Bye-bye. I would like to, just for your information, just keep the webinar open